I don't care if it's purely positive, positive reinforcement balance. They're all saying the same thing. Shut down behaviors. Stop the behaviors. You can do it in 15 minutes. Use a treat or a tool. This is all suppression of behaviors, and suppression of behaviors is going to lead to control and management and euthanasia. All they're doing when trainers and owners are providing negative consequence, it's you that's providing a negative consequence to the dog. The quadrants are creating this little world of positive reward and punishment for the dog to operate and condition themselves to. I don't provide negative consequence. I want the dog to experience positive consequence due to their choice. And once that happens, now you have the dog is learning on their own. They're not being punished. When you apply negative consequences, you're punishing the dog, and it doesn't work.
Then why on Tank do you have two leashes and one of them's an aversive tool? And that's just what we're seeing on YouTube. And you didn't even post the whole video.
That was a long time ago. That was quite a long time ago. Okay.
But you're saying, but you're making this. I never do this, and that sounds like you're Jesus Christ here. But as a behaviorist, there's certain things.
The owner requested that I double leash the dog just in case because she is so scared. If you notice, I'm only using
You're responding leash. To a scared owner. I wouldn't. You don't know. Hey, listen, I'm a professional. I know what I'm doing. Relax. Why are you responding to a scared owner?
First of all, you're calling yourself behaviorist. What makes you a behaviorist?
So I woke up this morning to a DM from an individual named Estub on Instagram, and I found this to be a very interesting testimony, and so I wanted to share this with you. Now, there was once a time when I was in Robert Hynes' Facebook group, and I lasted about 24 hours because he had kicked me out, accusing me of promoting dog training. He knew who I was when he welcomed me into the group, and he had told me what the rules were. Now, as you know, I'm not a dog trainer, and I do not promote training philosophies, especially for behavioral issues, so there was an individual who was looking for help, and I just proceeded to give some basic advice, and I think it had something to do with separation anxiety. They were sharing pictures of this dog tearing apart their home, and Robert had accused me of spreading harmful information, and before he kicked me out, he shared a link to my YouTube channel and told this individual to go watch the videos I made about him, and then he proceeded to kick me out on the grounds that I had broken the rules. But when I was in there, and I wish I had screenshotted things for people to see, as I typically do, but I just didn't get the chance to do it, but there were just as many people in that group having issues with the advice he was giving them as there were people saying that they found some benefit with it. But now this individual had sent me this message, and I just want to read it to you. It says, "Hi Kevin, I came across you the long way. First I joined Robert Hynes' Facebook group and later found Mark Dubose via that and watched a heap of his videos over the span of 3 to 6 months. I learned a lot from them both and have had some success and improvements in my relationship with my dogs implementing that knowledge, as well as what I had already been learning from Kathy Kowalek." Now I've not heard of Kathy, but that's a conversation for another time. Then they go on to say, "When I watched your discussion with Mark, I was very impressed and you gained an instant follower. Much appreciated. I have now stopped watching Mark and instead been binging on yours and Brandon Fouché's comments." And if you've listened to that debate or listened to my conversation with Dale, you know that Brandon Fouché was one of my very first influences, has been a main influence over the course of my 15 years working with dogs. I highly recommend you go check out Brandon Fouché's content. For the past 3 days, this individual says, "I'm so excited about what you guys are teaching and the amazing results I'm already noticing by starting to implement some of your ways. I can't thank you enough. We rescued 2 Kelpie litter mates at 8.5 weeks old, and after previously owning smaller breeds, I knew we had to step up our game to ensure that they would be confident and friendly dogs we could take anywhere with us." And then I keep saying she, I don't know, it's a man or a woman, I'm not sure. Sorry it's long, they apologize, no big deal. They go on, they started with Susan Garrett, positive only, but kind of the next level up, making the dog think and choose what to do rather than bribing or luring. I thought obedience training was the way to build their confidence and shape their behavior, but they were so anxious and we were in over our heads. Missed the socialization window because they were so reactive and chasing our tail ever since trying to get positive exposures, socialization, etc. We have definitely come a long way in the past 6 months, ditched all the quote training in September of 2024. They are now 1.5 years old. I now understand establishing the dominant position is key. Yes, it is, especially with multiple dogs. And I am already astounded by the difference after some small adjustments. See, guys, the keys are in the small details. Those small details make all the difference. And this is why I have such an issue with the passive approach that Robert and Mark propose is because there's a lot of small details that go unaddressed when you take this neutral, passive approach or mentality of handling your dog. So they go on to say, I bought into the pack mentality is debunked BS when first diving into research. And that's what the mainstream messaging purports. You know, the mainstream messaging and training ideas and individuals who are pushed in the mainstream will tell you that, you know, dominance and hierarchy and all this stuff has been debunked and it's bullshit, blah, blah, blah. So good on this individual for taking the time to reevaluate the things that they previously thought to be true. They go on, I feel pretty confident in my skills of reading and using body language and in dog, quote, handling, etc., as I've spent so much of my free time over 1.5 years relentlessly learning and researching dog behavior, etc., TBC. To be clear, I believe that's what that means. So then they go on to ask a couple of questions, but I'm going to move on to the response that they gave me after I initially responded to this message. So then they go on, hi Kevin, thank you so much for this. I can't express how grateful I am for you taking the time out of your day to read and respond to me. Of course, absolutely, you're welcome. Of course, you're more than welcome to share my testimony. Oh, and this individual is in Australia, by the way. I would actually be quite honored if you make a video featuring it, and it's the least I can do to thank you for your help. I also want to say I love the way you express yourself so clearly and get your points across so succinctly. I wish I had the same confidence in your way with words, particularly in speech and conversation. I will try to get and she's going on to say, I will try to get your husband to film some things for me so I can evaluate things for them. Again, I really appreciate the compliments. Thank you so much. I appreciate you watching and sharing your testimony, and thank you for the kind words. Now, they go on to say, we did actually start them with harnesses, and I recommend against these things. Initially, as we were concerned of neck damage, and that's typically the rebuttal I get. And so I teach people, like, okay, let me show you how to use a leash and collar without damaging the neck and without the dog pulling and choking themselves. Then after following online trainer's advice, moved to choke chains, so regrettably, and at much too young an age, and I don't use choke chains. Then we had an in-person consult with a trainer who switched us to a slip leash, also regrettably. I'm not against slip leashes, they're not my first choice, but I think used appropriately you can get a lot done. But again, you don't need to choke the dog with these things. And then we eventually moved back to the harness, and now only in the past few days since watching you, back to the flat collar again. I can see both of them rejecting the idea of a Halti, but we will get one if necessary. That's the downside of the Halti or gentle leaders. A lot of dogs fight them at first, and then they just learn to accept it. But that is the downside of that particular tool. They go on, I can do it, but I guess it just doesn't always look pretty. I agree. Where I imagine it would be much more controlled with a Halti. It would, but again, I promote, let's start with the leash and collar, move away from the harness. I would say 9 out of the 10 dogs I work with respond well to instruction if we just move to a leash and collar, because most people don't know how to use a leash correctly. So I just teach people how to use the leash correctly in conjunction with the collar. If I have a dog that does not respond to typical instruction with the leash and collar, then I will move to a Halti. If the dog is very forward, very pushy, a lot of pulling, and just I can't get anywhere with a leash and collar, then I'll move to a Halti. It's like my last resort. So I'm going to skip the next part and proceed to the next paragraph, but they go on to say, also, even though they were much more, quote, controllable in walks with the choke chain and slip leash, we were using them in an aversive manner as we were instructed. I now have much, and actually probably more, control with my method, she's referring to me, with just the flat collar and no aversive techniques at all. Yeah, and see, this is why I disagree with this language, aversive, punishment. I don't talk like this, I don't use these words, and I don't teach people how to use a leash and collar in these ways. They go on to say, they just follow, as they should, but we were taught to, quote, punish the dog for reacting to something, and I don't teach that. E.g., axle lunging trying to chase a car, so I would yank the lead, and we were taught it had to be strong enough that they saw it as a punishment and didn't just ignore, push past it, if that makes sense. It does make sense. I think that this has made his car reactivity worse. It's been a long time since I've punished him at all, especially around cars. Switched to treats to make cars a, quote, good thing. Then Robert's, quote, no big deal, do nothing approach, which obviously wasn't working. I can see your method working much faster, though, and makes so much sense now that I see it in action. You see, this is why I have an issue with guys like Robert accusing me of punishing a dog, and, oh, you're taking the head off the dog, and you promote methodological behaviorism. I don't think Robert's watched very many of my videos. If you go to his channels, he's only actually critiqued like 2 of my videos. So I don't think he actually knows what the fuck I do with a dog on a leash or in a home or what have you. He just lumps me in the category of a dog trainer and says I promote all this dog training bullshit that I do not do not promote, and that I believe in punishing and blah, 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 blah. I don't do any of this garbage. And so the person who was instructing this individual, yeah, I take a lot of issue with saying just yanking the leash and trying to punish the dog for reacting. No, we have to address the root cause of the reaction, and we don't have to punish the dog. We just need to understand, we need to get the dog into a follower mentality. And I have videos on this of how to use the leash the right way. And maybe if you have a Halti gentle leader, it's all about guiding the dog and breaking those moments when the dog becomes fixated on something, getting the dog to focus. Structured walks. It's not about punishing the dog into submission. It's about giving structure, giving guidance, giving direction, and establishing leadership. It's a much big difference between just punishing the dog into submission. I don't do that. Now at the end they say, one more thing, I was heavily into Kathy Kowalek's partnership-based lifestyle and subscribed to her program for about the past 6 to 7 months. And again, I've never heard of this individual. I'm gonna have to look her up, but they binged on her podcasts and they say it taught me a lot about building a relationship with the dog rather than just trying to train it. I also learned a lot from her about dogs being social learners and the hormone levels of the dog and how to help manage that and to meet their various needs to create a, quote, safe, calm, and happy dog. One of her main mottos. We saw some great improvements, but I can see now that what was missing was the social hierarchy aspect, and therefore we were too. So, this is what happens when your fundamental knowledge is flawed. When the fundamentals is not correct, or you're missing things, or you're dismissing something like dominance or hierarchy when it comes to dogs, and you're building a foundation from something that does not have its roots in truth. But kudos to this individual for taking the things she was learning, or they were learning, and applying them and getting some results. Now this Kathy Kowalek, I like what I'm hearing about this individual, but again, we have to make sure that the foundation of our understanding is rooted in the social hierarchy nature of dogs and canines. And we have to understand the mentality of the dog that's in front of us. And these are all fundamental principles that we need to be aware of and incorporate and internalize. Otherwise, we will be educating people and there will be things missing. We'll be giving information out and there will be gaps in the knowledge. There will be holes. And then what do you do when you need to address one of those holes? You won't have the right answer because the foundation of which you've built your knowledge base is incorrect. So anyway, thank you, S-Dub, for this awesome testimonial. I will definitely be responding to this soon, and I'll see if I can help you guys out any way I can. You know, we'll discuss Zoom call and whatnot, but thought this would be a good testimony, especially in response to Robert's constant preaching about his Facebook group, and this would corroborate what I have seen in there, where there are a lot of people that this shit just does not work for. There might be some dogs that his passive way of doing things, the easy dogs, that they'll get somewhere with, but when it comes to the more difficult, headstrong, dominant dogs, you're not going to get there with Robert's passive, permissive, Skinner-based bullshit.